Jerry Prokopovich at East Carolina University with Civil War Talk Radio. We always try to have guests on this show who have added to our collective store of knowledge and understanding about the past. Our guest today is no exception, but unlike many of us who study history for a living, today's guest spends his days making historic decisions as well as writing about them. Frank Williams is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Rhode Island, the author of Judging Lincoln, a collection of essays, and a member of the Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission. We'll be right back with the Honorable Frank Williams.
Onboard computers to improve fuel efficiency and reduce emissions.
Check.
Acoustic and optical wayside monitors to enhance safety.
Check.
Robotic systems to measure track geometry.
Check.
GPS tracking and tracing systems.
Check.
Sounds like a rocket or a jet getting ready for takeoff, doesn't it? Actually, it's something just as technologically advanced. A freight train. There's a new world of technology riding the rails that makes today's freight railroads more fuel efficient, safer, and cleaner running than ever. With wireless communications, transponders, and trackside readers that can pinpoint a shipment's location at speeds of up to 80 miles an hour, North America's freight railroads are driving the technology required by today's businesses and consumers. And with everything from apples to computers moving by rail, we wouldn't have it any other way. Chances are, the things you'll use tomorrow are taking the train today. Tomorrow, arriving by train. Sponsored by North America's Freight Railroads.
Mission critical. 2 words that describe the data vital to every e-commerce website. If your company needs the services of an unparalleled co-location facility, you need to remember these 2 words: Castle Access. With Castle Access, your internet servers will be secure in environmentally controlled data centers that offer high-speed managed internet access and the highest standards of 24/7 customer support. For more info, visit castleaccess.com. Castle Access. We keep you online all the time.
World Talk Radio, bringing the world to you.
This is Jerry Prokopovich at East Carolina University with Civil War Talk Radio. Today we're talking with the Chief Justice of the state of Rhode Island, Frank Williams. Frank, how are you doing today?
Good day, Jerry. It's good to hear from you on this special day, the day Lincoln died 140 years ago.
That's right. It's traditionally on the show we try to sort of hide what day it is because we're going to leave these shows up on the archive and people might listen any time of the year. But today is an anniversary of great importance, April 15th.
Right. And we should take a moment to pause about the great loss and the reflection of our culture of the time, and unfortunately today where there is still so much violence, and I think remembering Abraham Lincoln and his contributions is most appropriate.
Well, I would certainly think that's true. Now, you are involved heavily in ways to remember Abraham Lincoln. I mentioned a few at the head of the show here. One of them is the Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, about 2 years ago, the Congress, through joint resolution, created this United States Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission with 15 commissioners. I happen to be one of the 15, and the whole mission was to begin planning and hopefully executing and implementing the events and commemoration of Lincoln's 200th birthday on February 12, 2009. We've been meeting 3 or 4 times a year since then. In fact, we're meeting on the eve of the dedication of the new Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum in Springfield, Illinois, on the 18th of April to go over our mission. We did submit an operational plan with suggestions to the Congress in June of last year, 2004. Now I think our job is to disseminate the ideas to the states, many of whom, like Rhode Island, have created their own Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commissions, and to seek funding for the award of grants to implement what we're proposing.
Does the Commission itself have funding to give grants to other institutions?
We have some funding, and the policy hasn't been decided on whether to use that or more monies that Congress might appropriate. These are tough fiscal times, as we know. My own view as a commissioner is that we will be seeking contributions or grants to the Commission from other sources other than Congress. Congress has been very generous about giving us the operational monies that we need, but I think we need to look elsewhere for the funding to implement the scheduled events.
So then if the Commission does get the kind of funding they're looking for through donations or through government, then you would look for worthy programs to redistribute that money, or you would put on programs yourself?
Exactly right. This would be, as you know, Jerry, we already have a sponsorship program where if you're going to do a conference at East Carolina, you can seek an endorsement of that from the Commission. And when you endorse it, you use our logo and indicate that we have endorsed this. And we've done that with a few projects already. We're now at the stage where we need the fundraising to help you or anyone else that may suggest a worthwhile project, whether it's for education or publication or media presentation. We would consider that.
Imagine that Congress, in a fit of unparalleled generosity, just said, this is such a good plan, we're going to give you guys $25 million to put on programs around the country. What would you like to see done?
Well, I'd like to get into the schools, first of all. I think reaching our young people at the earliest possible level to talk about the Lincoln legacy is absolutely critical, and right through college, as a matter of fact. And you would do this in, I think, a number of ways, Jerry. You would do it through teachers' institutes, through revision of curricula, of having symposia and conferences at the college level, at delivering the message about Lincoln. And I don't mean in any hagiographic sense, that is Saint Lincoln. I'm talking about Lincoln as a man now, with the challenges and problems he faced, his relationship and views on race, emancipation, taking up, for example, or other examples, the revisionist view that some have that the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free anyone, or the De Lorenzo approach, a person with whom you've debated in North and South magazine, as I recall, over such things as whether or not Lincoln's actions, or he could have taken actions or no action to prevent civil war. I think all of this needs to be discussed with our young people as well as an adult audience, and that's going to take some doing.
That certainly is. While we're talking about today, April 15th, it happens locally to be History Day, and I spent the morning looking at some exhibits put on by junior high and high school students, some of which are quite impressive. But programs like that are suffering in part because of the political climate that is focusing on the testing of students. And the result is that if a state mandates tests in a given area, the schools pour all their energy into it. If they don't, because they're not going to be held accountable in other areas, the schools feel they can't afford to spend any time. What I'm saying is that because there's no test in social studies or history on a statewide basis in some states, those schools are reducing their coverage of history and social studies to focus on where they are being tested, English and math, maybe science. Thus, the well-meant attempt to test students is taking their focus away from everything that's not tested.
Right.
And history, unfortunately, is one of those areas.
Right. Well, I guess, to cut the Gordian knot, we need to get to those who decide what will be tested. And you know how we think, you and I think, that it's important that our students know our history
Absolutely.
And certainly the middle period, the Lincoln years, the Civil War years, are absolutely vital and critical for that. And I'm not just saying that as a Lincoln student, which I've been since the age of 11. I'm saying that because of something very real that we're confronting right now, which is the so-called War on Terror and its effect on civil liberties, if any, or what the balance will be between security at home and civil liberties, which are the same kinds of issues that were faced by Abraham Lincoln at the beginning of and during the Civil War.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to say that is an extremely important topic.
Right.
I want to hold off on that just for a minute because I want to spend maybe a whole section talking with you about that very important topic. But let me touch on something. You said you've been interested in Lincoln since you were 11, and we've been talking about young people. What got you interested in this subject?
Well, I was in public school in a small city in Rhode Island, and 6th grade, and you remember how we were seated alphabetically, right? And my last name begins with W, and I was in the last row in the last seat, and I was under this formidable portrait of Lincoln and was fascinated with his face. And Mrs. Taylor, my teacher, knew I had this interest in American history, and she directed me, and I began reading everything I could about him, about Lincoln, not disappointed. And when I was, in fact, started to spend my lunch money, 25 cents a day in those days, on used Lincoln books. And when I was 13, I wanted to be a lawyer because you get to know how good a lawyer Lincoln was. And that's what really started me on this path, and I haven't let up, even with periods of college and the Army and law school and the practice of law. It's only intensified, as you know.
That's right. So you went on to law school. You practiced law for a number of years.
Yes.
I followed the same path for a while. I practiced law, but I went straight. I decided to earn an honest living.
Well, my accountant, when I was a lawyer, said that I'm really a frustrated history teacher who sold out for filthy lucre by staying in the law. And there may be some truth to that. I love the law, as you know, but I love teaching too, and I'm doing some of that at the college level at the U.S. Naval War College in Newport and at Roger Williams University School of Law. So you should know, you and your listeners, that as Chief Justice here in Rhode Island, I've created a curriculum from K through 12 for our judiciary, or the law, and we send out teams of lawyers and judges to tell young people what the third branch of government does. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about doing for the bicentennial.
Now, I spoke not long ago to Larry Daniels, author of the recent book on the Army of the Cumberland, who was a full-time minister, and I was curious how he could minister to a very large congregation, an extremely demanding job, and still have time to write history. You are responsible for the judicial branch of an entire state. You also produce these curriculum materials and other things. How do you organize your time to find time to write about Lincoln?
With great difficulty. It was a lot better with a lot more time when I was a superior court judge, a trial judge, and when I was practicing law. But my task as Chief Justice is almost 24/7. So I really have to try to carve some time out early in the morning for writing. And when I give talks on Lincoln, as you know, Jerry, they're usually one-night stands with my leaving in the afternoon and giving it that evening somewhere in our country, and then back the next morning. I've once flown to Seattle, Washington one day and gave a talk to the Tacoma Bar Association on Lincoln's birthday that night and returned to Rhode Island the next morning. So that's all I've been able to do. I have some deadlines that we all have in writing. Edna Green Medford and Harold Holzer and I are finishing up a book for Louisiana State University Press on the Emancipation Proclamation, 3 Views. That's due my revisions are due in a couple of weeks. So it's being under a lot of pressure.
It certainly sounds like it, and I appreciate you taking time to talk with us today. You mentioned Lincoln's birthday. Where do you find yourself spending Lincoln's birthday most years?
Well, on the road, giving talks or at a conference, sometimes here in Rhode Island or elsewhere. It's really a high holy day, as you know, despite President's Day, which doesn't tell me much about honoring our presidents. So I'm usually giving a talk the 11th, the night before, or the 12th. This past February, many of us were at the White House, you know, for that presentation of Lincoln Seen and Heard by Sam Waterston and Harold Holzer, and back the next day for a talk here in Rhode Island.
That's right. That was a wonderful event, and I'm never reluctant to remind the listeners I got to go to the White House too.
Right.
I saw you there.
Well, what about Jerry? When I thought it was the president, but I've heard it was Mrs. Bush that opened the Lincoln bedroom.
That was spectacular.
And I'm 64 years old, and I've never been to the Lincoln bedroom, which your listeners should know was really his cabinet room, not where he slept. It's a bedroom now for visiting people, but it was awesome to see the fireplace and the portrait of Andrew Jackson that you would see in Carpenter's print or portrait of Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation with him and all of his cabinet members around the table, and it was just great to be there.
It really was. It was a marvelous experience. All of us who were there were certainly grateful to Mrs. Bush for, if indeed she was the one who said the guests could in fact go up to the Lincoln bedroom, because that's in the family's private quarters.
Correct.
And guests probably don't.
And just a very generous spirit that she had, and I think the president too, in doing this.
Well, it was certainly good to see history being presented in the White House. There's obviously, those of us who study it would argue that there's a great deal to be learned from history, and it does a lot of good for decision makers to be aware of the past, to use analogies, to look for comparable issues in the past.
Well, and I think that's true, whether you agree with this president or not. I think the fact that he's being exposed to this whole culture of leadership that Lincoln had, I think can do nothing but help.
Well, I think I would agree, whether one does agree or not, and certainly there are some strong issues, strong opinions on both sides.
Correct.
But I think no one would argue it's a bad idea for anyone to know what Lincoln was doing. Well, we're going to talk specifically about that issue you raised earlier, draw some comparisons between Lincoln's difficult decisions on civil liberties and some of the things that are going on in the 21st century. Our guest today is Frank Williams, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Rhode Island and a Lincoln author. We'll be back in a few moments with Frank Williams on Civil War Talk Radio.